The year was 2250, and Earth had become an unrecognizable battlefield. Ashen clouds swirled above what remained of New York City, obscuring the sun with a grim, permanent twilight. As Captain John Marrow surveyed the ruins, his eyes narrowed against the wind-whipped debris. Beside him, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kyle Riggs, scanned the horizon with a high-tech binocular. "This doesn't look good, Captain. It's worse than we expected," Kyle remarked, lowering the device, his voice tinged with disbelief. John clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture meant to bolster as much as to confirm the gravity of their situation. "We knew it wouldn't be a walk in the park, Riggs. But remember, we've come back from the edge before. We'll do it again." As they trekked through the desolate streets, Sergeant Mia Clark caught up to them, her boots crunching on shattered glass. "Satellite comms are still down. I couldn't get through to any of the resistance pockets we hoped to find." "Keep trying, Clark. We need all the allies we can gather," John instructed without breaking stride. The weight of his assault rifle felt familiar and oddly comforting in his hands. The small squad made their way to what used to be Central Park, now a makeshift command center marked by craters and burnt-out vehicles. Upon their arrival, a ragged group of survivors approached, led by an older man with steel in his gaze. "You must be Marrow. Heard you might still be alive," the man said, extending a rough, dirt-streaked hand. "Name's Harper. Used to run logistics for the Eastern Seaboard Defense Grid." John shook his hand firmly. "Good to meet someone who hasn't given up. What's the situation on the ground?" Harper gestured towards a cluster of tents shielded by upturned vehicles. "It's bleak. We've got maybe a couple hundred people left in this sector. Most of them are civilians. We're low on supplies and outgunned. The Vorex patrols have been increasing." Kyle stepped forward, his expression grim. "We have a plan to strike back, but we need more intel. Have you seen any patterns in their patrols? Any weaknesses?" A younger man who had been standing quietly behind Harper spoke up. "I'm Neil, sir. I've noticed they avoid the old subway entrances. We think it's because their sensors can't track through the lead lining in the tunnels." John nodded thoughtfully. "That's a start. We'll use the tunnels to move undetected. Harper, can you organize a team to gather supplies and meet us here at 0400 hours? We'll need everything you can spare. It's time to remind these invaders that Earth is not theirs for the taking." Harper nodded, a determined light in his eyes. "We'll be ready." As the men dispersed to prepare, John turned to his team. "Riggs, Clark, Neil, gear up. We're going underground at dawn. It's time to strike hard and fast. This is our home, and we fight for it till the end." The team acknowledged with a series of firm nods, each member mentally preparing for the operation ahead. As darkness fell, the lights from their makeshift camp flickered like dying stars against the twilight, casting long shadows over the determined faces of Earth's last defenders. The frost-bitten silence of the Arctic was shattered by the hum of generators coming back to life, echoing off the ice. Inside the hidden facility, deep beneath the surface, lights flickered on, revealing rows of cryo-chambers hissing as they opened. Captain John Marrow's chamber was the first to open, the frost peeling away from the glass as he sat up, inhaling sharply, the cold air biting into his lungs. Around him, others began to stir, the elite unit known as Echo Squad, selected for their prowess and cryogenically preserved for a crisis deemed unsolvable by conventional means. Lieutenant Kyle Riggs emerged next, followed by Sergeant Mia Clark, and then the rest of the squad, each member shaking off the disorientation of decades-long sleep. "What's the status?" John's voice was gravelly, the first words spoken in years that weren't muffled by ice. Kyle approached a terminal, hands moving quickly over the holographic interface. "Systems coming online, and it looks like we've been asleep for over 50 years. It's 2250, Captain, and there's an active threat detection." John joined him at the display, watching as the screen painted a grim picture of alien invasion and the near-total collapse of human civilization. "The Vorex," he muttered, a name they all knew too well from briefings that seemed both a lifetime ago and just yesterday. Mia stepped up, her brow furrowed as she read the incoming data. "Looks like they hit us hard and without warning. Major cities are gone. The population is decimated. We are, effectively, the last of Earth's military response." The reality of their mission settled over the room like a heavy shroud. This was not a mere training simulation. It was a desperate fight for survival. John turned to the squad, his gaze piercing each of them. "We were saved for a reason. It's time to live up to that. We have skills and technologies unknown to our enemy. We adapt, we fight, we reclaim." Their first order of business was to establish a secure base of operations. The facility was well stocked and fortified, but it would only serve as a temporary shelter. They needed to assess their resources, form a plan, and connect with any surviving human forces. Riggs, take stock of our armory and tech. Clark, establish a communication link to anyone out there. I want updates every 15 minutes, John commanded, each officer snapping to their tasks with practiced ease. As they worked, the sound of Sergeant Leo Barnes, the team's engineer, broke through the focused silence. Captain, you're going to want to see this. He stood beside a large crate in the armory, its contents glowing with the soft light of advanced weaponry and modified combat suits. John approached, examining the gear. Experimental exosuits. We were supposed to test these next month, he mused aloud, remembering the schedule that no longer mattered. Guess the test starts now, Kyle remarked, a wry smile cutting through the tension. He lifted a suit from the crate, its joints flexing with a smooth whir of servos. John nodded, a grim determination settling over him. Suit up, Echo Squad. We're not just defending Earth. We're taking it back. As the squad equipped themselves, the facility became a hive of activity, a beacon of defiance in the icy desolation. John watched his team, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. They were humanity's last stand, and they would not go quietly into the ashes of their world. Under the ghostly glow of the Arctic sun, Captain John Marrow led Echo Squad through the labyrinthine ice tunnels that had protected them for decades. The air was crisp, charged with a palpable tension as they prepared for their first engagement against the Vorex. With their new exosuits equipped, the squad felt almost invincible, but John knew better than to underestimate their enemy. We strike fast, hit them where it hurts, and disappear before they even realize what's happened, John briefed his team as they neared the exit point. Lieutenant Kyle Riggs nodded, checking his weapon settings. Our first target is a Vorex supply convoy, spotted routinely near what used to be the Canadian border. We disrupt their supply lines, we start to choke them. Sergeant Mia Clark, now in charge of communications, piped up from the rear. I've managed to tap into their comms network. It's encrypted, but I caught enough to confirm the convoy's next pass. They won't expect an attack, not this far north. The squad emerged from the tunnels, stepping into the harsh light of day. The barren landscape was a far cry from the bustling cities they once knew. Now it was just miles of ice and snow, a perfect battleground for an ambush. As they positioned themselves, John paired off his team, placing them at strategic points. Remember, we're not here to hold ground, he reminded them. Hit and run, then back to the ice. Hours later, the distant hum of Vorex vehicles cut through the silence. The convoy appeared, a line of armored transports guarded by floating drones. John raised his hand, signaling the squad to hold their positions until his mark. The lead vehicle entered the kill zone, and John dropped his hand. Instantly, the quiet was shattered by the roar of gunfire and the whine of energy weapons. The Vorex were caught off guard, their vehicles scrambling to maneuver as Echo Squad's firepower tore into them. Kyle targeted a transport's engine, causing it to explode spectacularly, scattering debris and shaking the ground underfoot. Meanwhile, Mia and another team member used portable EMP devices to disable the drones, which fell like broken birds from the sky. Within minutes, the convoy was devastated, a smoldering ruin in the stark white snow. John signaled the retreat, and Echo Squad vanished back into the ice tunnels, leaving no trace of their presence except the wreckage they had caused. Back at the base, the squad debriefed. Good work out there, John commended, though his eyes were hard with the weight of the war still ahead. This was just the first step. We've sent a message today, not just to the Vorex, but to any human still fighting. We're not beaten yet. Mia updated the group on the broader impact. I've broadcasted encrypted signals to known survivor outposts. They're picking up our signal. Our success is giving them something they haven't had in a long time. Hope. That's exactly what we need, John agreed. Hope and a plan. We hit them again, keep them off balance, and use this momentum. Kyle clapped John on the shoulder. They thought they had wiped us out, thought Earth was theirs for the taking. They were wrong. John looked over his team, their faces set with resolve. Let's get ready for the next operation. We have a planet to reclaim. In the weeks following their first successful raid, Captain John Marrow's Echo Squad had turned guerrilla warfare into an art form. Striking from the shadows of the Arctic, they targeted Vorex outposts and supply lines with precision, growing bolder with each victory. As their fame spread, scattered human survivors began to rally, forming a loose network of resistance cells energized by Echo Squad's exploits. One cold morning, as the faint sun crept over the horizon, John convened a strategy meeting in their Arctic base. Maps and digital screens lit the room, showing satellite imagery and intelligence reports. "We've got multiple cells now operating in sync with our movements," John announced, pointing to markers on the map. "Our next step is to coordinate these attacks, amplify the impact." Lieutenant Kyle Riggs leaned over the console, his fingers tracing potential targets. "We've been hitting them hard here and here," he said, indicating their past strike zones. "If we can synchronize strikes on these Vorex communication hubs, we can cripple their ability to respond effectively." Sergeant Maya Clark chimed in, her voice steady. "I've established secure lines with the leaders of the largest survivor cells. They're ready to follow our lead, but we need to ensure our communications remain unbreachable." John nodded in agreement. "Mia, keep rotating the encryption daily. Kyle, start planning the joint operations. We're not just fighting anymore. We're organizing a rebellion." Later that day, John led a small team, including Kyle and Mia, on a reconnaissance mission near what used to be the outskirts of Toronto. The city was now a shadow of its former self, with ruins overgrown and silent. They needed to assess the Vorex's defensive perimeter for their next series of coordinated strikes. As they surveyed the area, a sudden whir of drone engines alerted them to an incoming Vorex patrol. John signaled for cover, and the team quickly camouflaged themselves among the debris. Peering through a digital scope, Kyle whispered, "2 drones, 4 infantry, standard patrol unit." John assessed the situation, his mind racing. "We take them out quietly," he instructed. "Use the EMPs for the drones, knives for the troops. No gunfire. We can't alert the main force." The team executed the plan flawlessly, demonstrating the silent lethality that had become their signature. After disabling the patrol, they collected any intelligence they could find, including a data pad dropped by a Vorex soldier. Back at the base, Mia worked quickly to extract information from the device. "Looks like we've got detailed patrol schedules and supply routes. This is a goldmine," she reported, her eyes alight with the success of their find. John reviewed the data, his mind already plotting the next moves. "This information could give us the edge we need to take out their comms hubs. Prepare for a full briefing at 1800 hours. Everyone needs to know the plan." As the day turned to dusk, the Resistance felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Echo Squad leading the charge and a growing network of fighters united under their cause, the tide of war seemed to be slowly turning in humanity's favor. The struggle was far from over, but each small victory brought them closer to reclaiming their home. After weeks of relentless guerrilla strikes and the successful crippling of Vorex communication hubs, Echo Squad and the growing resistance movement prepared for their most ambitious operation yet, a direct assault on a major Vorex stronghold. Captain John Marrow knew this attack could shift the war's balance in their favor, but it also posed significant risks. In the dimly lit war room of their Arctic base, John laid out the mission details on a digital table display surrounded by his core team and representatives from various human resistance cells. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of their collective responsibility palpable in the cold air. "The stronghold we're targeting is located here." John pointed to a fortified location on the map, deep in what was once Colorado. "It's heavily guarded, but it's also a major logistical hub for them. Taking it down will disrupt their operations across the continent." Lieutenant Kyle Riggs, ever the tactician, chimed in. "We've got multiple teams in place ready to strike simultaneously. We'll use a 2-pronged attack to divide their forces and penetrate their defenses." Sergeant Mia Clark updated everyone on communications. "All teams have synchronized their watches to the second. We go dark on comms until the first strike. After that, it's open lines to coordinate movements." The discussion shifted to logistics, with each cell leader confirming their resources and personnel. The operation required precise timing and flawless execution, as any deviation could lead to catastrophic failure. Before dawn, John and his team geared up, their exosuits now scarred from previous battles but as resilient as the soldiers within them. As they moved out, John felt the familiar surge of adrenaline mixed with the heavy burden of command. The attack commenced at 0500 hours under the cover of darkness. Echo Squad led one of the main assaults, using the rugged terrain for cover as they approached the Vorex stronghold. The first sign of the enemy was a drone patrol, quickly neutralized by Mia's expert EMP throw. As they breached the outer defenses, the air filled with the deafening sounds of battle, energy blasts, explosions, and the harsh cries of Vorex soldiers. John led from the front, his rifle steady in his hands as they pushed deeper into the enemy base. "Push forward. Echo team, flank left toward Sector 3. John's voice cut through the chaos, directing his team with clear commands. Kyle and a subgroup peeled off to intercept a Vorex reinforcement squad, while John and the others planted explosive charges along critical infrastructure points. Minutes felt like hours, but the coordinated assault proved effective. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the stronghold's main reactor was destroyed, sending shockwaves through the enemy's network. The retreat was as organized as the attack, with each resistance cell covering the others as they extracted from the devastated site. Back at the base, the team's exhaustion was overshadowed by a sense of significant accomplishment. "We've done more than damage their infrastructure today," John addressed the gathered fighters, his voice hoarse but firm. "We've shown them that we are not broken, that we will keep fighting until Earth is free." As reports came in from other cells, it was clear the operation had sparked further uprisings across the globe. The tide was indeed turning, with humanity now on the offensive, rallying around the victories led by Echo Squad. The war was far from over, but for the first time in years, hope was on their side. In the aftermath of their successful assault on the Vorex stronghold, Captain John Marrow's Echo Squad had become the spearhead for Earth's resistance. Intelligence gathered during their previous operations had unveiled a critical piece of information: the location and vulnerability of the Vorex mothership, currently in geostationary orbit above Earth. John knew that if they could strike there, they could end the war. Back at their Arctic base, John met with his core team and key resistance leaders to plan the most audacious mission yet. The room buzzed with nervous energy as they discussed the feasibility of a direct assault on the alien mothership. "We have one shot at this," John started, his voice steady despite the gravity of their discussion. "We've captured a Vorex transport craft. It's still operable and should be enough to get us on board the mothership without immediate detection." Lieutenant Kyle Riggs looked over the schematics of the alien craft. "We've retrofitted the transport with explosives. Once we're on board, we plant these at key structural points. It's a suicide mission, but if we succeed, it should knock out their command and control capabilities for good." Sergeant Mia Clark, who had been coordinating their communications, added, "I've set up a fallback comm link directly to the resistance. If we don't make it, they'll know exactly where to hit next." The team spent hours going over every possible scenario, from entry points and guard rotations to escape routes and contingency plans. Despite the high stakes, the squad was determined. They were ready to risk everything for a chance to reclaim Earth. Under the cover of darkness, John and his team, suited in stolen Vorex armor, boarded the captured transport. The craft was cramped, filled with the equipment necessary for their mission and the palpable tension of what was to come. As they approached the mothership, the vastness of the alien vessel loomed before them, a menacing silhouette against the backdrop of space. John's heart raced as they docked seamlessly, thanks to the Vorex technology. The squad disembarked quietly, moving with precision through the corridors of the mothership. They encountered minimal resistance, thanks to their disguises and Mia's hacking skills, which kept their presence under wraps. Reaching the first checkpoint, John planted the first charge. "2 more to go," he whispered into the comm, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. As they set the final charges, an unexpected patrol stumbled upon them. A brief but intense firefight ensued. Kyle took a hit but managed to eliminate the threat with a precise shot. "Go on without me," he gasped, clutching his side. "Make sure this counts." John clasped Kyle's shoulder, a silent promise in his eyes. With heavy hearts, they left him behind, setting their timers synchronized. With seconds to spare, John and Mia raced back to their transport. The ship shook violently as the charges detonated, ripping through the mothership's core. As they made their desperate escape, the mothership began to break apart, a fiery testament to their sacrifice. Watching from the transport's rear window, John and Mia knew that their mission had changed the course of the war. Breathing hard, John turned to Mia. "For Earth, for humanity," he said, the weight of their losses and victories mingling in his voice. "For all of us," Mia replied, her eyes on the stars that were a little brighter now, with hope kindling anew for their planet. The destruction of the Vorex mothership marked a turning point in the war, but it was far from over. Captain John Marrow and the remaining members of Echo Squad returned to Earth to find the resistance invigorated by their daring assault. The news of their victory spread like wildfire, bolstering the spirits of fighters across the globe. Yet with the Vorex command structure in disarray, the aliens became more unpredictable and dangerous. John, hardened by battle and loss, especially the sacrifice of Kyle Riggs, convened with the leaders of the resistance in their fortified Arctic base. The room, lined with maps and digital screens, buzzed with strategic discussions. "We've got them reeling," John announced. "But now we need to push harder than ever. We strike all remaining outposts before they can regroup." Sergeant Mia Clark, now his second-in-command, nodded in agreement. "Intelligence suggests they're consolidating forces near the ruins of Chicago. If we can break their hold there, we can end this." John and Mia planned a multi-pronged attack involving all resistance cells. This final operation required every fighter they could muster. The briefing was intense. Everyone understood the stakes. They were not just fighting for survival, but for Earth's future. As dawn broke the next day, the resistance launched their coordinated assault. John led one of the main attack forces, advancing through the war-torn streets of Chicago. The city, once vibrant and bustling, was now a desolate battleground, with crumbling buildings providing cover and craters hindering their advance. The Vorex, though disorganized, fought back with desperate ferocity. Energy blasts lit up the dust-filled air as John and his team maneuvered through the debris. Every step forward was hard-won, with Echo Squad members covering each other's movements, their coordination a testament to their months of guerrilla warfare. In the midst of the chaos, a large Vorex unit cornered part of the human forces in an old shopping district. John, realizing the tactical disadvantage, made a quick decision. "Mia, take lead here. I'm going to flank them with a squad." With precise movements, John and his team circled around the enemy position. They launched a surprise attack, catching the Vorex off guard and enabling the trapped resistance fighters to break free. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering losses, but the humans' resolve did not waver. As the final Vorex stronghold in the city fell, a cheer rose up among the human ranks. The battle for Chicago was over, and it was a decisive victory. The remaining alien forces, realizing their defeat was imminent, began to retreat. John stood amidst the rubble, his face smeared with dust and sweat. He watched as the survivors embraced, relief and joy mingling with grief for the fallen. Mia walked over to him, her expression both weary and triumphant. "We did it, John. It's over." He nodded, looking out over the city. "We've won the battle, but the war for peace starts now. We rebuild, not just Chicago, but all of Earth. We prove that humanity isn't just defined by war." The fighters gathered, listening to John's words. They knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in years, they faced it with hope. The Vorex were defeated, and Earth was theirs once again. As they started the hard work of rebuilding, they did so with the determination that no force, alien or otherwise, would ever break their spirit again. As the dust settled over a liberated Earth, the scars of the long war with the Vorex remained, carved deep into the planet's surface and the hearts of its survivors. But with the Vorex driven out, humanity began the arduous process of rebuilding, not just their cities and lives, but their bonds with each other and the planet they had fought so fiercely to reclaim. Captain John Marrow, who had become a symbol of human perseverance and tactical genius, stood looking out over the horizon from the top of what remained of the Willis Tower in Chicago. The city spread out below him, a patchwork of destruction and construction, was bustling with activity. Around him, teams of engineers, supported by Echo Squad's remaining members, worked diligently to restore power and infrastructure. Mia Clark, now officially his second-in-command and a key figure in the reconstruction efforts, joined him at the lookout. "It's hard to believe it's really over," she said, her voice reflecting the awe and relief shared by many. John turned to her, his eyes thoughtful. "It's a different kind of battle now, Mia. One we're not trained for, but one we need to win all the same. Rebuilding is more than just structures. It's about communities, about restoring faith in humanity itself." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young engineer who handed John a tablet. "We've established a new communication network, Captain. We're ready to broadcast your message." John nodded, taking the tablet. He stepped in front of the makeshift camera set up on the tower's edge, looking into the lens, aware of the millions of eyes that would be on him. "This is Captain John Marrow," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for humanity. We have endured the unimaginable, fought against an enemy that sought to erase our existence, and we have prevailed." He paused, letting his words resonate across the waves. Now we face the challenge of building a world worthy of the sacrifices made. A world where peace isn't just the absence of war, but a thriving, vibrant reality. We've seen the worst of what we can be, and now it's time to show the best. To all who can hear me, let's rebuild together, not as separate nations, but as a united Earth. Across the globe, from the ruins of old cities and the enclaves of survivors in remote areas, people listened. John's message sparked something more powerful than any weapon: hope. In refugee camps, homes, and community centers, humans embraced, their resolve strengthened by his words. As the broadcast ended, John and Mia walked down from the tower, joining the others in their daily tasks. The work was hard, the challenges numerous, but with each building restored and each community reunited, the identity of Earth as a home was slowly re-established. Months passed, and the anniversary of the Vorex defeat approached. John, who had refused any formal title or government position, was planning a memorial to honor the fallen, a reminder of the cost of freedom and the importance of peace. On the day of the memorial, people from all walks of life gathered, standing together in silent homage. John spoke briefly, his words imbuing the crowd with a solemn pride. As the names of the fallen were read aloud, candles were lit, illuminating the night, a symbol of each life lost and the enduring light of humanity. With the memorial concluded, John stood back, watching as people left tokens of remembrance. Turning to Mia, he smiled faintly. We keep them in our memories, and we honor them with our actions. We build, we teach, we live in peace. Mia nodded, her expression resolute. Yes, we do. As they walked back through the recovering city, their steps were firm, their mission clear. The war had ended, and now, under a united banner of peace and recovery, humanity's new chapter was just beginning.